We all pick up ideas from other people. Their stories are inspiring. Here at the Bizkit, we bring you a new case study each week. Someone running a small business who can show you by example how they've made their business grow. This week,
well, there was no eureka moment. It was a passion and something I've always done more as a hobby. I've always bought vintage and sourced it and always looked in vintage shops and looked for vintage online. And as I was becoming increasingly aware that people were saying, well, girls were saying to me all the time, oh, I love that handbag, I love that dress, where did you get it from? I suddenly thought, actually, I should be sourcing this for other people. And I've always, I used to buy it when I was 13, 14 from markets, although it was called second hand then. And I worked in a vintage shop on the King's Road in Chelsea when I was a student. And so I learnt a lot from the owner there. So it just seemed to make sense to start dealing in vintage, really, and setting up a website and selling it. I think the main challenge was that I was so eager to do it that I didn't give myself enough time, because I have another career as well. I work in magazines as a fashion and beauty journalist, and I'm very busy. I have lots of different roles on different magazines as a freelance, and once I got this idea to do this website, it was all consuming, but of course my normal job had to happen as well. And I set the website designer a deadline, and then I told everyone I was going to launch on a certain day, and it just wasn't enough time, really. I mean, I did it, I managed it, but I would say if you're setting up a business, work out exactly how long you think it's going to take and then double it, and then give yourself that deadline rather than setting unrealistic ones, because the pressure was enormous then to reach the deadline that I'd set for myself, which was silly. 3/4 of it I funded with my savings, and the other quarter I just took out a small bank loan. But I didn't want to take out huge loans because we are in a recession, and it's not I've never set up a retail business on the internet before, so I didn't know how it was going to go. So overspending is easily done, but it's not something I'd recommend. I wouldn't take out huge loans to buy, well, in my case it's stock, but I wouldn't take out huge loans to do that unless you really have to, because then you could just be sat with hundreds and hundreds of items that just don't sell or don't sell for years. So I think actually you have to be quite frugal when you set up your business, which is hard to do. You could set up a business like this for 5,000 or 50,000. It's up to you really to decide how big or small. But if you don't have much money, my recommendation is to start small and build and see how you get on. Well, without realising it, I'd been market researching for 20 years because it was a passion. So I already knew so much. There's lots of names in vintage, like this dress is an Aussie Clark, and he's a well-known designer name. And there's lots of them, and there's a dress over here which is a Jean Varon, and all these names I already knew about because I'd been looking for vintage myself. But in terms of specific market research, obviously because I'm a vintage website, I then looked far and wide at all the other UK vintage websites, American ones, all worldwide, and looked at exactly what they were doing. And I have to be honest, my plan was never to do what they're doing. I always wanted to be, how do I put it? I just wanted to be a fashion-forward, trends-led vintage website. So Lovely's Vintage Emporium is more like a sort of Grazia magazine on the internet, which is a women's weekly fashion magazine. Whereas a lot of the other vintage websites, they put it into eras like 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. I don't even do that, because to me it's not about a certain era or dressing in a certain way. It's about finding an item that's a one-off that you absolutely love, and that's fashion-forward, so you don't look like you're in fancy dress. My biggest strength is my passion for it. I mean, I'm absolutely passionate. You won't want to, but you could film me for hours. I could go through every single item on all these racks. I've got about 400 items, and I could tell you the provenance of them, exactly where I bought them from, what they mean, what the labels mean, what era they're from. I mean, that's a huge bonus, because that must come through to my customers. I'd say on a practical level, my biggest advantage is that I've been a fashion journalist for nearly 20 years. So hopefully I know how to present clothes, because I've done photo shoots with various celebrities on various magazines. I've worked for Vogue in Australia and New Woman in Australia. I've worked for Cosmopolitan and Eve and Now magazine in the UK. So for example, OK magazine called me last week and asked to borrow some items for a photo shoot. I knew exactly, when they said who the celebrity was, I knew exactly what type of clothes they would want for that celebrity. I knew how to choose them, package them up correctly, do a proper sheet, because I knew what the stylist requirement would be, because I'm a stylist myself, so that's a big advantage. In these current economic times, I would not set up a business purely to make money unless it's something you really are prepared to put your heart and soul and effort into. There's no fast buck, as the Americans say, or quick buck. You know, it's something the amount of hours I do and the amount of energy I put into this compared to financially what I get out of it at the moment doesn't add up. But it doesn't matter because I love doing it, and I know eventually, I feel sure eventually it will be a very successful business. So I think that's my biggest advice to anyone. Just do what you love and turn it into a business.